Hey guys, and welcome back to DIY Grunt. On this week, I'm going to be continuing the garage makeover, so this is going to be part 2. And the first thing I'm going to be starting with here is over here in the alcove area where my workbench used to be. I'm going to start with installing that light right there, because that will finish this area for the ceiling portion, and then I can start painting the upper portion of the walls here, since I am going with a multiple color scheme on the walls throughout the garage. Okay guys, it's day 2 of part 2 of the garage remodel, and unfortunately we lost the footage for day 1. We accidentally deleted it, but I did knock out the light here in the alcove where the workbench was, and I've already primed the back part of the ceiling and the wall that still remained. So for today, what I need to do is I need to patch the drywall here at this light, because when I uninstalled the lights the way they had installed them, I ended up ripping the drywall in the process. So that hole is a little too big just to fix by throwing some drywall compound into it. So I'm gonna have to use an actual patch for it. And then the area around the light you can see is kind of tore up, and that's because when I started rolling the primer onto it, and I've had this issue throughout the garage, and this is what has slowed the process down. As I'm rolling the primer on, the old paint is literally just ripping off the surface. And I think what happened is they didn't prime the drywall back in the day when they painted this garage when the house was built. They just threw the finish paint onto the wall directly. And so now that I'm trying to prime it, that surface friction of the roller rolling across it is ripping that paint off. So I'm gonna have to go up there and probably just use the paintbrush to try to fix that, because every time I use the paint roller in that area, it just rips more and more of it off. And I've had this issue throughout the garage, which has slowed down the process quite a bit. So I also have the other light that needs to be done. When that one was uninstalled, it ripped the drywall there too. So I'm gonna have to do that as well. Okay, so as you can see, the walls and the ceiling are fully primed. We completed that in day 1. And now moving into day 2, what I really need to do is I need to start with painting the ceiling. The sooner I get finished paint on the ceiling and get my 2 coats done, the sooner I can move everything that's under the garage doors right now and move it back here to where I'm standing at, and then I can finish the last part that is not painted, because everything in here currently is primed except for the area directly above the garage doors. Hey guys, it's day 3 of part 2, and today we're going to be focused on painting the walls. So because I'm doing a 3-color scheme, what I want to do is I want to divide up the walls into my 2 initial colors, and then I'm going to have a red line, a red paint line going through the middle of the walls. So I want the first color to go from the top of the baseboard and 36 inches up the wall. And then the red line will be 4 inches thick above that, and then the final color will go from the top of the red line all the way up to the ceiling. But what I don't want to have to do is I don't want to try to measure precisely 36 inches up from the baseboard and try to paint the first layer perfectly and then come back and do like the red and then do the third color. Because if I make any little mistake with my taping or my marking, I could end up having an area where the primer is still showing through, or you'll see one spot where the finished paint from the top area dips into the red, or vice versa. So to kind of help avoid that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to split the wall into 2, and I'm just going to paint the top color and the bottom first, and then I will come back and do the middle line. So to do this, I'm going to split the difference. So I'm going to add 2 inches to the bottom color, and we're going to mark at 38, and therefore the bottom color will come up to 38, and the top color will come down to 38, and then I will just go over the 4 inches in between, and hopefully that should avoid any real issues, and I can avoid trying to have like primer show through. Because at least that way the primer is completely covered no matter what, and any mistakes I make in between aren't a big deal, because 4 inches right there in the middle will be sacrificed to that third color, which is the red. So to help mark, I'm going to use a chalk line. So I've already measured up on the wall with a pencil line, and I've put my corners at 38, and now we're just going to run the chalk line across the wall, snap it, and mark it real fast with the chalk line.
I don't want to snap.
Okay.
I have no interest in snapping.
Alright, so the upper walls are now painted with their first coat, and I'm going to start on the lower portion. Now for the lower portion of the walls, I'm actually using a paint that was left here from the previous owners, and it's the same paint that was used on all the interior walls inside, and it's a darker gray. So I'm going to go ahead and use it up because I got probably 2.5, 3 gallons still left in this 5-gallon bucket, so it should be more than enough to finish the lower portion of my walls, and of course then I'm not wasting paint, and I'm not just throwing away this entire thing either. Okay guys, quick update. So I believe it's day 4 of the video right now for part 2, and the walls are fully painted. We got the 3rd coat on them this morning. As you can see, you still see the little line here where the chalk line was, and that's okay because we are going to put that 3rd paint, which should be a red. I think it's what we've decided on, to break up the difference between the darker gray down below and the lighter gray up above. So the only things left in here that still need to be done is the floor and then the ceiling directly overhead right now for where the garage doors are. I got to get everything moved over. But I got one more coat of paint to put on the ceiling over here, and then I'll be done there. So now, since I'm waiting on the walls to dry and I no longer have to worry about them, I'm going to start working on the closet floors because I want to get them painted. So first thing I'm going to have to do is clean them. So I'm going to pressure wash first. And I'm going to have the vacuum in there running at the same time because I can't flood the closets or that water is just going to soak under the walls basically. So hopefully by tomorrow I'll be throwing paint on the floors. At the same time I want to finish the ceiling today so that I can get the lights up tomorrow and then get everything moved over so I can hit the final portions that aren't painted, which is directly above the garage doors right now. Alright, so I'm finishing preparations to be able to paint the closet floors. Now, most concrete paints do not require you to use a primer, but they do require that the concrete has been etched with an acid before you apply the paint. So that is the biggest step after a cleaning of the floor with like a pressure washer and scrubbing them down. The biggest thing you're going to have to do is etch it with acid. So I've got my acid prepped and I'm about to just scrub it on, and then I'm going to let it sit and I can come back and rinse it off after I'm done. So I'm going to go around and do all the closet spaces now. Okay guys, today is the big day. I'm finally starting to paint the floors and the closets. So I've already got the paint open and stirred and ready to go. I lost track of what day it is again. I think it's about day 7 or 8. But we took a day of rest to allow some paint to fully dry and cure, and now we're ready to get back at it. So today's gonna be really busy doing a lot of priming to finish off essentially everything that needs to be primed that's still left. And that's gonna include the 2 doors that will go back up, the ceiling directly overhead needs to be primed, and then the small closet is now ready after I removed a whole bunch of bricks, like probably over 100 bricks were sitting in that closet, and some roofing shingles were sitting in there too. So those are piled up behind me right now, and eventually I need to move them outside. So today's just going to be really focused on priming, getting the 2nd coat of paint on the garage floor for the closets that are currently in process, and then getting the last areas etched with the acid as well, so I can start painting those tomorrow. And then the only thing essentially that will be left here in the next 2 days that will need to be painted will be the main garage floor, which will have to wait until everything else is done so I can shove everything in this current space into those areas and then have whole access to the entire garage floor at one time.
How many times will I hit my head? Oh!
Okay guys, so I have no idea what day of the project this is. I am, however, extremely close to being done. I only have a little bit of trim that still needs some painting, and then I have the garage floor, which we're about to start on. So I'm about to start cleaning it, get it pressure washed, get some strong like detergent on the floor to get any oils and stuff off, and then I gotta etch the concrete, of course, and then I'll be ready to apply paint. So I'm gonna clean today and hopefully be capable of applying paint tomorrow. I am gonna do the garage floor in 2 sections though, so I'm gonna do one half of the floor at a time. And right now I've got the half closest to my large closets ready to go. So we're gonna start here, knock this out, and then do the other half in about 3 days after the floor is dry and fully painted. Of all the stuff that was left behind by the previous owners, this is by far my favorite thing now. So the squeegee really wasn't useful, or wouldn't have been useful for pressure washing my warehouse floors, because there was no way to squeeze the water out into out into the driveway. But here, since it slopes downward, I don't even have to use the vacuum. I just squeegee all the water out of here. Much faster. Alright guys, so since the beginning of the video I've been saying that the walls are going to end up being a 3-tone color scheme. And so I've got the light gray up top, the dark gray on the bottom, and I was going to go with a red stripe in the middle. So to do this, normally I would paint the wall, I would apply blue painter's tape, mark out the area that I wanted to paint for that stripe, and then paint it with the red. But this has a couple of drawbacks, especially with what I've been experiencing with these walls. So primary issue on hand is that if I apply basically any sort of tape to the wall, if I go to remove it, especially with the blue painter's tape, I still have this issue. It's ripping my paint directly off the wall. And I'm pretty sure this is because they did not prime the walls initially. They just applied their paint back in the day, and it's not holding to the wall. So anytime I put tape on the wall, it pulls it right off. So I can't get a perfect wall if I try to tape my area and then paint. The other issue on hand is that typically what you'll end up having is it will bleed up or bleed down, and you'll end up with red paint where you don't want it to be, so you end up having to go back, do some touch up, and then I go back and do touch up on the gray to get rid of the red, and I end up getting gray in my red, and you end up doing this constant back and forth trying to make it perfect. So to kind of avoid this, what I'm going to use is I'm going to use some 3M red duct tape to make my lines. And since I don't have to take this off the wall, I don't have to worry about the tape or the paint ripping. Now, if anyone ever wanted to go remove it in the future, it would rip that paint directly off the wall, but that's going to be someone else's fault or issue because I am not going to remove this. So this is a fairly simple process. I've already done one section of the wall. You might have noticed when I was cleaning the floor that section was already done. Now I'm going to go through and show you how I do this process. Now this is only about 2 inches wide, slightly less than that. I think it's about 1.8. So I am going to use 2 pieces. I'm going to double it up so that I get close to that 4-inch line that I wanted originally. Okay, to start with, I need to determine where I want the bottom edge of my tape to be. Now originally when I wanted to paint the red line on the wall, I wanted to have that line be about 4 inches wide. So I determined that I wanted the bottom of the line to start 36 inches above the top of the baseboard. So all I have to do is measure up 36 and then mark. Now my blue line, when I did my chalk line, was measured up at 38. And the reason for that was so I wanted to make sure that when I did the red, that there was no primer showing through. So the 2 colors met in the middle, and then the red would cover it up completely, and it wouldn't be a big deal. So the 38 in this case, I'm just gonna ignore, except what I'm gonna start with is I'm gonna apply a piece of tape that kind of centers itself on the blue chalk line, and I'm gonna start with that. Then I'm gonna come back and apply another piece of tape, which will halfway cover up that initial one, because it's gonna line up with the 36. And remember, it's only 2 inches wide, and I want a 4-inch wide line overall. So after I apply my piece of tape here, which will line up with my 36-inch line, I will then come back and apply a 3rd piece of tape, which will ride right on top of that 2nd piece of tape, and that will cover up the first one, which is covering up the blue chalk line. That will completely cover that first piece of tape entirely. And then there won't be any chance of the wall showing through, because I won't have missed anywhere. Because even if my tape is a little bit off, if I'm not quite perfect in leveling it, it won't matter, because that bottom piece is covering the wall. When I'm doing the 2nd piece of tape, or I should say my 3rd piece of tape, but my 2nd one that's going to be visible, what I want to do is I want to line it up right on top of that bottom one. I don't want to cover and try to eliminate having the seam. I want the seam there, and that's okay, because that piece underneath, that first one I laid down, it's there to make sure that the wall won't show through. So I want to very carefully run it and line it up with the top of that piece of tape. And I'm not looking to cover it up, I'm just looking to line it up on edge. Because if I try to cover up that top edge, then what's gonna happen is I don't have anything to keep me level going across the rest of the wall. I could end up starting off pretty level on one end, and by the time I hit like the middle, I could be dipping down a lot farther than, say, just like if I'm just trying to cover it up like 1 millimeter, then I might be 3 or 4 millimeters down, and that's gonna make the tape very noticeably unlevel across the surface of the wall. So I just wanna line it up right with the top of the piece of tape as best I can. And a little bit of gap is okay. I just wanna keep it minimal. Whoops. All right, this is a good little learning point right there. So if I got if I get an air bubble right here, if I don't have the ability to pull up the tape and fix it, then you can just try to push the air out. But if it's not coming out, one of the things you can do is, if you're using a knife like I am, just go in, stick it just a little bit, just a tiny little hole that you won't notice, and then push the air to that hole, and your air bubble's gone. Okay, so for the rest of the walls, I haven't had to deal with outlets, but if you are taping and encounter an outlet like I have, what I've found is the best way to do is just continue on with your process. Now I've only got a little bit of outlet that I'm gonna encounter, just the bottom part of the metal bracket. So I'm just gonna continue on like normal. I'm gonna apply my tape, make sure it's aligned correctly, okay? And then I'm just going to lay it flat across. Now, if you want, you can leave it like that. My issue is it's covering up the hole in which the plate needs to screw into. So to fix that and to help eliminate any sort of inconsistencies where the tape's not laying flat, I'm just gonna take my knife, I'm gonna cut directly to the side of the bracket and down until I'm past it. Do the same thing on the other side. Now I'm going to peel back the tape off of the bracket. Oh, got a little bit stuck right there. Okay. Until I expose the bracket just like that. And now I'm going to go underneath. Cut it off, remove it. Everything's good. Now, when I come in with my electrical plate, it's going to be able to cover that hole or cover that area, so you won't even notice that I cut it. And the hole is exposed, and I'm not going to have any issue of getting my screw in there and getting my plate back on correctly. Okay, since I ran out of tape right after my outlet, if this happens to you and you don't have enough to complete an entire strip, what I do is I don't want to start this piece and try to line it up here at the other end, because then I might have that gap where the wall shows through. So I'm going to overlap by about 1/2 inch or so with that original piece and try to line it up perfectly top and bottom so that you don't know. And then I'm just going to continue on from there. Okay, so I'm finally ready to finish the garage floor. I've already got it cleaned and vacuumed, and the other section of the floor is now dry and capable of being walked on. So I'm gonna finish this area, and hopefully it won't rain too bad tomorrow like it's predicting, because I do get some water that leaks in from underneath the door behind me, and we just haven't been able to fix that issue yet, so I don't want that water sitting on the floor. So I'm gonna take the risk anyway. I'm gonna paint it today and get the first coat on it, and then so long as it's still dry tomorrow, I'll put the second coat on, and then basically at that point the garage will be fully done, minus some minor touch-up work here and there on the walls and on the ceiling, where I've got just a couple places where I'd like to fix some paint that overlapped. Okay guys, it's been a very long project, but the garage is finally done. In fact, this project went way over schedule. It just took a lot longer for paint to dry and for the shelving to be completed than I expected, but overall I'm really happy with the results. As you can see, there are still a few areas where I need to finish. The baseboard behind me is not completed. I did manage to find the baseboard at the store, and so I have what I need to do. I just don't have my miter saw in hand to make those perfect cuts to finish it off. So I have a little bit of touch up here and there to do throughout it, so I would say I'm about 99% done with the garage, so I will finish those off as I have time. And then the door to the backyard and the door to inside the house are still the original color. And mostly I just haven't decided if I want to paint those white like the other two garage doors in here for the closets, or if I want to incorporate the wall color scheme into them. I'm really considering incorporating the wall color scheme onto the door for the backyard, but it would look a little weird for the door going into the house, just because it would only get like maybe a foot of that color involved for the bottom part. So I don't know if it would look so great there. So I still have to make up my mind on that. But overall, yeah, the garage is done, and it turned out really well, so I'm really happy with this. So I hope you guys enjoyed these two videos, and stick around because I've got lots of projects coming up here inside the house. Now that the weather's getting a lot warmer and more humid, I want to focus inside on doing some of the remodels there, and they're going to be pretty exciting too. So see you next time on the DIY Grunt.